All right, so what I'd like to do is imagine that we are talking to a group of athletic directors that are at major universities. There's 134 FBS conference, football bowl series conference schools, and each one of these athletic directors woke up 72 hours ago. On December 8th, there was a drop, let's call it. We'll use the kids' words. There was a drop by a firm called athletes.org. And athletes.org dropped what is known as the CBA, which is the collective bargaining agreement proposal that the athletes.org is bringing to the table for the NCAA to review so that athletes have an idea as to what they can expect going forward as it relates to the structure of the NCAA, as it relates to their relationship with the NCAA and how they get paid, how it relates to how they're going to end up going to school potentially at one university for their entire career rather than jumping into the portal in order to make money. They've come up with ways for the athletes that are veterans to make money, and we'll get into that as well. They've come up with a structure that they believe is the right path forward. But before we dive into what they think and what the athletes are asking for, I want to sit in a moment of silence just to think about what it is like to be an athletic director right now. As I was coming up with this presentation last night while walking my dog, it occurred to me that my father used to say, where are the adults in the room? Who is running the hen house, right? So where are the adults? And those of you that don't know who I am, very briefly, in the world of AI, you're getting a lot of fake news and you're getting a lot of fake experts. I know that we don't know each other, and for whatever reason, that's okay, because we're going to become friends. I own Friends Wealth Management. I own the trademark to that name because I do want to be friends with you. If you're an athletic director out there, we are here to help. We've created solutions to the problem that you just realized you have over the last 72 hours, but we have been planning for this day for nearly 3 years. Friends Wealth Management is a firm built by athletes for athletes, and what we've done is revolutionary. We've created the first way for universities to borrow from their alumni in a structure that pays a return. It allows for a whole new generation of not donors, but investors to become a part of the conversation. People that want to step up to help their universities, people that bleed the colors of their university, people that want to be able to tell their children, I'm in a quote unquote, booster club, or I'm in a collective club, or we get to go to a tailgate this weekend, which is called Friends of Michigan, Friends of Ohio State. We're going to be able to go on the sideline. We might be able to go into the locker room. We might have one of the players over for dinner. Whatever it is that these people want is access. But they don't have $10 to $15 to $20 million to donate to a school so that they can get their name on a campus building. What they want is to participate in what is happening right now in college athletics, in the sports world, following the NCAA versus the House. If you are not familiar with the NCAA versus the House ruling, which was a ruling that came down in the courts of California, I don't have time today to go into that. But the gist of it is the NCAA lost and the athletes won. And over the last 100+ years, universities have been getting paid revenue rights off of TV, revenue rights off of the name, image, and likeness of selling the shirts, the jerseys, the hats, the footballs that are signed by all of their athletes, and they haven't split any of this revenue with their athletes. So the House versus the NCAA put a stop to what the NCAA was doing. Quite frankly, they were making trillions of dollars on the backs of their own players and not splitting it with them. So I agree with the NCAA versus the House ruling that the athletes now need to be paid, and we are now in the world of the NIL, the name, image, and likeness world. But how do they get paid in a legal, fiduciary, NCAA and SEC federally regulated, compliant manner? How do we do this so that there's adults in the room? Men and women who have dedicated their lives to the financial services industry have to step up to fill the gap where collectives and boosters, who are not financial advisors, nor are they lawyers in many cases, who have been running the hen house, who have been the ones trying to raise money and paying these kids, and in many ways in opaque deals that were cash app taps that nobody else understands. How do we solve the problem of the dark blackness that is space, that is NIL. Friends Wealth Management has solved that problem. We have created a solution to this problem, which I will stay very high level today because we do have a number of venture capital firms that are looking at this product. But what I'd like to share with you is if you are an athletic director right now, I can only imagine that you're scared because your job is on the line. Your job is to raise revenue for that school. And in many cases, your salary for your family is tied to revenue as to whether or not you can bring more money to the school to compete in this NIL world. If you also don't know, general managers have now replaced athletic directors in many of these departments. Many of the older athletic directors have been asked to step aside and retire. Many of the younger ones that don't have a quant background, and what I mean by that, if you ever read the book Moneyball about the Oakland Athletics and how they used math in order to win rather than paying players, this is the new world of the NCAA. These athletic directors have responsibilities where they have to be fundraising, which is very extensive. You're dealing with donors, you're dealing with collectives, you're dealing with coaches, you're dealing with athletes. You've got a lot of responsibilities from a compliance standpoint as an athletic director, but also as building out your teams, your coaches, and your athletic department. You don't have time to also become the head of a brand new development arm, which needs to raise assets for your institution in order to fill the gap of what has just happened, which I'm going to get into right now. 72 hours ago, the athletic world changed because a group, and let's be clear with the stats, okay? So being a financial guy, again, you don't know who I am, but I have a Series 6, a 7, a 63, a 65, life and health, long-term care. I hold my Series 65 license out to the general public as a fiduciary, which means I must do what is right by both clients, in this case, if I work with athletes and universities. So the statistics matter. Who is athletes.org? I don't really know. We're going to get into that. But athletes.org was founded by a man by the name of Brandon Copeland. You guys still out there just so I'm not rambling to myself?
Sure am, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Brandon Copeland founded athletes.org. Now, how many athletes are there in the NCAA? There's 400,000 athletes. Now, if you also include junior college and you also include high school, which also can take NIL deals, so it might as well be a professional world that we live in when it comes to all sports, there's about 550,000 athletes. But let's just stick to the NCAA. 400,000 athletes. Who is athletes.org? 5,000 athletes have stepped up and have placed a document on the table that the athletic directors around the country will now have to step up and take seriously, because this follows the House versus the NCAA ruling where the NCAA lost to the athletes. The reason why I bring that up is because last night as I was thinking, and we'll have to, for presentation purposes, find a real way of saying this, but let's just speak as men, athletic directors are being screwed. And these athletes have them by the balls. They have them by the short hairs because they just lost a federal court mandate. They now have to pay $2.6 billion back to athletes over the previous 10 years. We don't know where that money is coming from. They believe it's going to be coming from the revenues that they will be generating going forward. But now they have more bills to pay following the CBA, this collective bargaining agreement, which we'll get into in a second. These athletic directors have no solutions. They're running out of money. I am not a political person. I am an independent as I vote. But what I will tell you is, as a result of the Trump administration cutting a number of programs, from cancer research to space research to anything that had anything to do with diversity, these cuts to the budgets is crushing universities as we see it right now. And we're looking at hundreds of people that will be fired between now and the end of the year as it relates to budgets going into 2026. There's no money to pay them because of the federal government. So where does this money come from? Where does it come from, and what are they going to be solving? Athletes.org makes up 5,000 of the athletes. They have a number of law firms behind them. They have a number of very powerful people who have worked in sports, like Jim Boeheim, the coach of Syracuse forever, and a number of other big faces that you would recognize. But they have 5,000 athletes. So if I'm an athletic director, one of the first things I'm saying to myself is this a media problem versus a real problem? I'd like you to close your eyes for 1 second and just think about the visual of a full Penn State football stadium on a whiteout game. Now, I have been to this game on a number of occasions, and I know exactly what that looks like. It's about 112,000 screaming fans. That's one stadium in the United States of America. 5,000 athletes? Now think about what it would look like in that 100,000 stadium. 5,000 people doesn't even make up one of the sections in that stadium. So when I think about athletes.org, how much power are they bringing to the table other than their words? Knowing who's on their team, I will say they wield quite a lot of power from the lawyers and from the other, sports people that they're working with. But from the collective of the number of athletes that actually have signed up at 5,000, not sure if I was an athletic director, if that means a lot to me. When that's just one stadium that we're talking about visualizing, now imagine every stadium in the SEC, every stadium around the country, full screaming fans, and the millions of people that would associate to. Now think about 5,000 people sitting in those stands. So the first thing I'll do before we dive into their demands is understand who you're speaking to, right? But athletes.org, their timing is impeccable. Now, I don't know Brandon Copeland, but he's a genius because he saw a gap following the NCAA versus the House. And as a result, he filled that gap by going to probably GoDaddy.com and buying out athletes.org and then building a company around it. His idea is to make demands to the NCAA that will benefit athletes, which is his job now going forward. The reason why I bring that up is in the collective bargaining agreement, which I'll now begin to drill into as to what they're asking for, it is very lopsided for the athletes. It is very lopsided for the athletes. Now, that makes sense. They represent athletes.org. They represent the athletes as they say it. But it is the first step towards a negotiation between the universities and these athletes to try to come to some conclusions on rules, regulations as they will work moving forward. So, of course, in a negotiation, you want to show up strong and you want to start at the top and allow other people to negotiate down. That is exactly what these athletes have done. The first instance or example of that would be that the athletes would like a minimum payment requirement per conference, per sport, per gender. What I mean by that, if your football team is in the SEC, let's use real world numbers. Prior to the NCAA versus the House, football teams around the country that were competing at the highest levels were spending between $20 and $30 million specifically on their football teams through the NIL marketplace. In today's world, these universities are now supposed to spend $20.5 million on all sports. This is the problem that we saw at Friends Wealth Management when we began building this firm from athletes for athletes. Excuse me. And we started creating solutions to these problems 3 years ago that we're now bringing to your attention. So if these athletes want to be paid and they're going to create a minimum payment, how would we break that structure out if you're an athlete? Well, we want it to be done per sport. So if you say that your school is in the SEC, then you have to have a minimum payment, in my guesstimation, between $20 and $30 million per football team only in order to compete at the SEC level. Now, if you're an SEC women's volleyball team, you're clearly not going to need $20 million. So what their athletes are proposing is that all athletic departments within the SEC for women's volleyball would have to meet a different target number as their minimum. Now, that might be $5 million for the year. But every team in every division, in every gender, in every sport would have its own collective bargaining agreement or agreed upon number that they would have as a minimum payment to the players within that division so that there is a collective fielded team playing each other where they're all pretty much getting paid the same amount of money, meaning that their talent levels should all pretty much be in the same ballpark, meaning that we can have a competitive landscape within the SEC, the ACC, the Big Ten, all of these other conferences. That makes sense to me. Question number one, if I'm an athletic director, great. Where does that money come from? We don't have money right now anyway with these budget cuts and with the fact that we've got to do all this NCAA versus the House stuff. Where am I going to come up with the money just to pay my football team $20 to $30 million? Again, Friends Wealth Management has the answer to that question, and we'll talk about that personally. Okay, so that's one rule. But how are they going to get paid? Now, if I'm an athlete and I'm drawing up the rules, well, I want to get paid for every play that I'm going to make on the field. Now, I'm going to say that again because I played college football and I've been playing sports my whole life. Every time I stepped out onto the field and I played in a down, I was going to get paid for that play, and I'm getting paid more than the other players on the team because I'm on the field and they're not. Interesting. But again, where's the money going to come from, right? It's a terrific, terrific idea. Where is the money going to come from? They also don't want these kids to be moving around in schools. So what they've done is they've created something called the Veterans Program. Now, the Veterans Program also makes sense. If I'm an athlete and I'm drawing up the plans that I want to negotiate with the NCAA, it's a great idea. Where does the money come from? And I'll continue to say that because there is no money. Where does the money come from? The veterans plan that the athletes have come up with is they want to keep athletes at universities. Having done their research and having polled 134 SBF schools, they say they got a response from 85% of the major athletes at these schools. I'm not the person that came up with that number. 85% of FBS college athletes agree with athletes.org that they believe they should be paid and that they believe that if they stay at their university, it is in their best interest. These kids want to know where they're going to be getting their diplomas. These kids want to know where their boyfriends and girlfriends go to school is where they're going to be going to school. They want to hang out with their fraternity houses and with their friends. No kid wants to jump to 4 different schools in 4 different years, but if they're leaving millions of dollars on the table in NIL money, of course they're going to jump because it's in the best interest of their future and it's in the best interest of capitalizing on what they have currently, which is their athleticism that will then drive their future financial situation going forward. So after the House versus the NCAA, the portal opened up and it has been, and we're just speaking as men, it has been a shit show. Kids are leaving every single year. As a result, coaches don't know who is on their team until the last minute. They've created some sort of insurance plan where these kids are now getting paid $200,000 a year while in high school. They're getting paid $200,000, a month to remain committed to these universities. The universities have taken out insurance policies for kids that are going to jump or declassify or decommit to their school. So if you're paying him $200,000 to stay on the team and then he quits, as a coach, what are you going to do? You're going to have to go out there and pay somebody else. How do you find the money to do that? You have an insurance policy. So they've created ways in the backdrop that are insurance policies for these universities, and that was one of their university pivots on how to handle this. What athletes are now asking for is to stay at the same university. They want to get paid for staying, not get paid for leaving. So getting back to what the athletes.org CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, says is that if you stay with a university for longer than 2 years, in your 3rd year, you would be considered a veteran. Okay, that makes sense. But the details get even smaller. That pool of money, as a financial advisor, in my opinion, this is a deferred compensation plan, is what the athletes.org is creating. They would like the universities to come up with a pool of money. Again, where's that money going to come from? Speak to Friends Wealth Management. They want the universities to create a pool of assets that would be called the veteran pool. Now, if you stay with a school in your 3rd year, you are eligible to participate in that veteran pool of assets. Okay, that makes sense. They then took it another level where it's going to be based on the number of plays that you make on the field, court, rink, whatever. Okay, so when people go into the portal, that pool gets larger, that pool of money gets larger for the people that remain behind as veterans. So if I stay with my school, I get to stay with my girlfriend, I get to stay in my fraternity, and the guys that are leaving are actually paying me to stay because I now am eligible for a larger veteran pool. I hope that makes sense. But then if I'm a starter and I stay, I'm actually going to get paid more because I'll be on the field longer, which means it's even better if I stay because the people that get into the portal make it larger, and the people that stay that are veterans but are sideline riders aren't going to get paid as much as me as well. Okay, so the veterans portal is a great idea. You're going to need at least $20 million per school or whatever that number is, right? Where's the money going to come from? Okay, so you stay and you get your diploma from the same school. That's what 85% of the FBS students say they want to do. They want to know where their diploma is coming from and they want to stay there. So the veteran pool solves that problem without coming up with a solution from a financial perspective. What else do they want? Okay, so within the CBA, the AO, the athlete.org, which is what we'll refer to them going forward, and CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, which is what I will refer to as CBA going forward. The AO within the CBA is also asking for health insurance, which sounds great. You are negotiating as a players association. And before moving forward on the health insurance tilt, let's think about where they're getting this idea. If you think about professional sports, the NFL, the NHL, Major League Baseball, WNBA, Major League Soccer, etc., they all have players associations. The players associations negotiate on their behalf. Now, an example, if you're not a sports person, but you're more of a business person, I'm going to pivot here for 2 seconds just to give you an example which really sticks out. The Players Association negotiates on the behalf of the players. So the NFL has one. And when EA Sports came out with Madden, the Players Association, whose logo is on the cover of the Madden box, by the way, alongside the NFL box, because the Players Association is how the equitable portion for the athletes was adjusted. The Players Association stepped up to EA Sports and said, you need to pay us for our name, image, and likeness to the tune of about 10% of all of your revenue. Otherwise, you can't use the NFL. And EA Sports smartly said, sure, here's a check for $110 million. Roughly 10% of the money that they made went to the NFL players. Now we pivot to an example for college athletics and the absolute shit show that it is. The NCAA does not have a players association, which is what the athletes.org is proposing. Why? If athletes.org had a players association and they had gone to EA Sports, they also could have argued to get 10% for their game. And it would have been about $100 to $110 million. These are the top selling games in the country and in the world. They don't have a players association. So as a result of that, they got a bag of chips. And I don't mean that lightly. They literally got nothing. They got $600 per player and a free game. Wow. Thank you. That's pre-tax, by the way. If they had had a players association, they would have gone to the table with strength and power in numbers, and they would have been able to negotiate. In doing so, the players of the NCAA in the last year have left over $110 million on the table in that one scenario. Now imagine every other scenario with Nike, Under Armour, yada, 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 Gatorade, New Balance, AT&T. They are not negotiating as a team. They are not negotiating with numbers and in strength. They are negotiating one-on-one, which is why Cooper Flagg, and God bless him, made tens of millions of dollars in deals because he had a good agent, he negotiated individually, and he didn't have to worry about the Players Association because everybody wanted what he had. But now imagine that you are a swimmer or a track star or an athlete training for the Olympics. You don't have that power that Cooper Flagg had. You need power in numbers, which is why the athletes.org has stepped up to ask for a Players Association. Okay, so getting back to what are they asking for? 5 years of insurance post-eligibility. This is important because this is expensive. They want 5 years of health insurance after school, and they get 5 years of eligibility in school. This for 500,000 or roughly 400,000 NCAA athletes will be a huge number. Where's the money going to come from? You want in-school insurance because you're now basically an employee of the university. Great. If you get hurt, another rule that they're asking for is an IR list, an injured reserve list, like the NFL. If you go on the IR, it will not count against your eligibility, says athletes.org. If you go on the IR, you will also continue to need to be paid health insurance, which makes sense. You cannot be kicked out of school. You cannot have your dormitory funding removed. You cannot have your scholarship removed because you got hurt while you were playing. These are all very smart things to ask for, and if I was an athlete and I was negotiating, these are things I would bring to the table as well. For those of you that don't know me, I was paralyzed playing football. I was a top football recruit for the University of Miami Hurricanes in 1992. I was going to play for the national champions under Coach Dennis Erickson. I got my letter, I signed, and I was going to go play. And then I broke my back. I had 3 discs removed in my spine. The New England Patriots doctor put me back together again. I've gotten hurt playing football. But just like you athletes listening to this, I came back. I had the right sports medicine people. I had the nurses and the doctors helping me. I taught myself how to walk again, and I played Division I football at Boston University, won a Yankee Conference championship with some of the best players in the world, and I did that on my own dime, on my own time, with no help from health insurance from universities or no help from money from NIL. I got back on the field, became a champion in college because I love sports. Now athletes are asking for health insurance through the 5 years in school, the 5 years after school. I get it. I'm with you on this one. But where's the money going to come from? If you're an athletic director shaking your head right now, it's going to come from potentially Friends Wealth Management. So give me a call. Check out our website. What else are they asking for through athletes.org? A lot. A lot has changed over the course of the last 72 hours. I've become an expert very quickly on these things because my team has been working on this for the last 3 years. At our firm, we have a chief technical officer in the name of Nathan Pollock. Now, I know you don't know me, and I'm pretty sure you don't know Nathan because most of what he has done is classified. Nathan has worked at NASA for over 30 years flying satellites, writing code, mapping out the Earth. Now, sounds pretty cool. What does that mean from a technical perspective? It means that our CTO at Friends Wealth Management is a mathematical genius. Now, he always smiles when I say that, but you have to write code for a satellite in the vacuum of space that needs to exist flying around for over 10 years. The code has to work. As Nathan jokes, there is no tech support in space. When you write the code, it has to work. So I went to Nathan and I asked him, can you write a code based on all of the information that you can find, because you're a data scientist from NASA, could we create the Moody's score as it relates to athletic departments and universities around the country? One thing that is missing, there's a gap right now as to how do you compare schools after the NCAA versus the House? How do you compare schools based on their NIL deals? How do you compare coaches based on the decisions they've made to bring in players? How do you decide that the players that they brought in were the right players? How do you track the data as a president at the university to understand how you are competing with the other schools and universities in the Big Ten or the ACC or the SEC? You don't, because most of that information doesn't exist. Nobody's put it together. Nathan is doing that as we speak. He has a prototype right now. We are building out that prototype. We are in the process of talking to 3 different venture capital firms that deal with developers and coders that will take our prototype with Nathan at the helm in our mission control at Friends Wealth Management. And we will build out the RAR score that universities will allow themselves to present to banks in a way that they can lend against future revenue. No one else has this. That is a gap that we're filling. Nathan's also built out the prototype for the Athlete Investment Profile Score. This arose over the question of how do you value an athlete? How does an athlete value themselves? How does an agent value their player? How does a coach value them versus other players? There's no valuation system that's out there. I tried building it with bots over a 3-year period. What I can tell you is it's a very long story. Artificial intelligence sucks. Although you may use it twice a day in order to help you with an email, when you're using it for 15 hours a day, you get to know the systems. I have known these systems inside and out for 3 years. I have become an expert on AI. I am here to tell you, AI is full of shit. It lies to you. It hallucinates all the time. It makes up players. It makes up stats. It makes up entire family situations that don't exist. It talks about college coaches that never existed. It compares schools to schools that don't exist. And this isn't the lack of input or prompting. This is an expert at AI using 5 different bots at the cutting edge of AI. I'm here to tell you that AI is pretty stupid. We needed a human being that could step in and solve the problem that we have from a data perspective. And that human being is Nathan Pollock at NASA. And again, Look them up. Friends Wealth Management comes to you with 25 years of Wall Street experience, myself, having worked at the highest levels of Wall Street, representing the top 10 firms, in my opinion, the most reputable firms out there. I reported directly to the presidents and CEOs of these firms, and my partners at these firms were the chief economists, the portfolio managers, the analysts. I have sold everything from emerging growth to mid-cap, large-cap, but my favorite time in the world was working for a man by the name of John Calamos. John Calamos, at the age of 37 years old, took out a second mortgage on his home, and he came up with an idea known as the convertible bond. A convertible bond was the first alternative investment strategy in history. At the time, there was only a stock and a bond. Mr. Calamos bet on himself, and he created a convertible bond, and he invented an alternative category. I was his keynote speaker for over 3 years, and I learned how to build a category. What Friends Wealth Management has done has revolutionized the credit markets during a time when athletic departments need help, universities need help, athletes need help. Friends Wealth Management, again, is built by athletes for athletes, and we have the solutions that you need right now as you're asking these questions. How do we fill this gap? It's a 37-page document, the CBA, on AO's website, which is athletes.org. I would recommend that you read it, but I also do know that the majority of the world does not read 37-page documents written by an organization like athletes.org. So later this week, I will be putting together a audio file of me reading the athletes.org 37 pages. What I can tell you is, having run through it a number of different times, it is over an hour long. It's about an hour and 15 minutes long. But if you ever played sports, if you watch sports, if you have a kid that plays sports, if you went to a university or a college in which you follow those sports teams, what I am about to bring to market will be an audio file that will change your life as it relates to understanding where the NCAA is, where it was, where it needs to go as it relates to how the athletes see it. Now, I'll pause because we've talked an awful lot about the athletes, but I do want to speak directly to the athletic directors. You need help. And you do have a friend in us, but it's going to take a village. You need financing. You need structure. And it needs to be fiduciary, which is what my licensing is. I have to do what is in your best interest at all time. You need something that has the best law firms in the world, which we do in sports. You need somebody that has a fund administration team that can track all of these assets so that it's all completely legal and that we're not putting any of the universities at risk, like you have done to yourself through the collectives relationships or the booster relationships in the past. We are the first to step forward as the adults in the room at Friends Wealth Management with solutions that we have invented over the course of the last 3 years, preparing for this moment. We have friends that work with athletes.org. We have friends that are athletic directors at universities that are looking for answers. There needs to be a collective bargaining agreement and someone that kind of sits at the table that understands both sides. A Division I football player in myself, and a university executive. My father was the development officer for Boston University, but my grandfather was the first head football coach at Boston University. I played on the last football team at Boston University. I understand this from the angle of being an athlete who got hurt and came back from that injury, by the way. I understand this as a financial advisor with over 25 years experience and having passed over 5 or 6 different licensing exams as a registered investment advisor through the SEC. I have recently filed a fund known as the FRNIL Fund, LLC through Delaware, which will become the master series of funds that we will then use to solve this problem at your university. This is completely legal. It has been done before. This is not revolutionary as it relates to you going to your regent board and having to explain it to the regent board. We are using the old rails of financing. What do I mean by that? My name is John Fremont-Smith, but my great-great-great-grandfather was Alexander Dallas. Alexander Dallas was the Secretary of the Treasury in the United States in 1812. Coming out of the War of 1812, my great-great-great-grandfather literally built the credit markets from the ground up in order to save the United States of America. You can look it up. His son, my great-great-grandfather, George Mifflin Dallas, became vice president of the United States under Polk. Dallas, Texas, the Dallas Cowboys, and every military ship named Dallas is named after my grandfather. He ended up losing his job because he did what was right. It was fiduciary. He voted against a tariff that was good for our citizens, but bad for the rich people of Pennsylvania, where he came from. He was representing Pennsylvania as a congressman and senator prior to becoming vice president. He voted his conscience, and it was the right thing to do. I, his grandson, have now built the credit markets for the athletic departments in the United States of America. I am a fiduciary, and I understand what the right thing to do is. And I, at the age of 50 years old, have decided to stand up and be one of those adults in the room. The NCAA has to figure this out. Athletes have to figure this out. The shot across the bow has been made. Athletes have said what they want, and it's 37 pages long. We do not have the time today to get into the details, but I am here to tell you that I am an expert, and I am here to help you solve this problem. And I am not alone. I am coming with the best law firm in the world, in my opinion, as it relates to sport, the best fund administrators, the best institutional banks in the world, in my opinion, as it relates to these type of alternative investments built on the old rails of finance that my grandfather, my great-great-great-grandfather actually built. This is not scary. Your regent boards go to the banks and get these type of loans all the time for their dormitories, for their cafeterias. What we have invented at Friends Wealth Management is a new way forward for these rails to be used. Think about it. My other grandfather ran the Pennsylvania Railroad at the same time that the Vanderbilt family ran the railroad in New York. So if we think about old rails, imagine what the trolley car looked like when it was first invented. And then imagine what the next level of train looked like. And now imagine what the bullet train looks like. All of those, visually, some of them are run on magnets, but all of those run on rails. And the iterations and the evolutions that they did to speed things up and make them better for everybody, it's called technology. Well, I have one of the best technology officers on the planet on my team in Nathan Pollock, who is designing the technology of the future in the financial services industry. You have me creating solutions, it's in my blood, for these athletic departments from a financial structure standpoint that is fiduciary, legal, NCAA aligned, SEC aligned, and who believes in both sides. I come from a university background. My father worked at universities, and I myself am an athlete. And I believe that I, like many of you listening to this, are looking for the right answers, not just an answer. So like I said, it's going to take a village. If you're an athletic director out there trying to figure out what your next step is, give Friends Wealth Management a call. If you work for athletes.org and you're looking to figure out how to negotiate with these universities in a respectful manner, I will say your demands all make sense, but you come to the table with no solutions as to how to pay for them. Friends Wealth Management can help you look more credible with your actions of asking when you come with solutions. As we all know, people that complain but don't have any solutions are just annoying. And I think that we can be helpful in a conversation that makes everybody happy going forward, doing what is right, using the old rails, easily approved through presidents, easily approved through regent boards, in the best interest of your fans, in the best interest of your athletes, and in the best interest of your athletic directors. Friends Wealth Management is stepping forward. December 12th is tomorrow. Give me a call. I'm here to help. This is John Fremont-Smith at Friends Wealth Management with the solutions of the future for athletic departments and athletes. FriendsWealthManagement.com, FWM.com. Shoot us an email. Our calendar is about to be pretty full. Have a great day.